I think from the Russians' point of view, they will milk this for all it's worth, but I don't think they are going to make any particular change to their negotiating position.
Let's talk now to Mark Galeotti, Russian security expert. Hi, Mark.
Hello there.
What do we know about the alleged attack? I mean, Gregoire was saying there that there is no evidence. Have you seen anything approaching evidence?
No, not at all. And I must admit, I've been sort of scanning the Russian media this afternoon quite closely, trying to find anything. Instead, in a sort of classic pattern, we're not getting evidence, we are just getting a ramping up of the conspiracy theories. And of course, it's worth noting, after all, that as with all things that go wrong with Russia, somehow they're suggesting that there might be some kind of British connection to this too. But no, I mean, we haven't seen any footage of debris. We haven't had people coming forwards, residents in the area saying, "Ah, yes, I heard the drones overhead," or whatever else. So at present, I think we have to assume that it was a gambit.
Except, I mean, it's an interesting point that's just come through from Mike, who's texted in 8722. Start your message with the word times if you'd like to text in. Who says simply, I'd be very disappointed in Ukraine if they had not tried to kill Putin. Now, I don't want to put any stock in what Russia are saying the Ukrainians did. The Ukrainians deny it. Most European commentators agree. But I'm just curious, as Gregoire was saying this, Mark, a moment ago, I was thinking, would it have been so awful if they had... I mean, he's the commander-in-chief of that army. They invaded Ukraine. Why would he not be a legitimate target if they had pursued him? Why would that be really beyond the pale? Just because they're supposedly having peace negotiations?
No. I mean, I think it's more. First of all, there is, to be honest, something of an unspoken etiquette that you don't go after the other nation's leaders, because if not, they'll come after you. The Russians did try to assassinate Zelensky right at the beginning of the war.
Well,
But
exactly.
since then,
Yeah.
they haven't launched attacks on Zelensky's residence, on the parliament building, and so forth. There is, again, this sort of balance of terror there. Secondly, look, if Putin dies peacefully in his bed, then I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see the transition of power to one of the next generation down, who on the whole are not sort of wild-eyed zealots. They are essentially kleptocrats who just want to be able to steal and enjoy the wealth. However, if he is killed, then in the ensuing anger and chaos, the chances that we'll get a leader who is more like a younger, maybe smarter Putin, who actually has something to prove, is actually not inconsiderable. And we have to remember Russia can, if need be, mobilize a lot more resource and force into this war. So I think from the Ukrainians' point of view, not only would it alienate a certain amount of international opinion by going after Putin, it might actually create an even worse situation for them.
And finally, and I guess this is the sort of crucial question today, isn't it, in response to what Sergei Lavrov was saying yesterday, what is the new strategy? What is, the new frontier of negotiations? What does that look like? Is it just an increasing list of targets, really?
Yeah, I think that we shouldn't really put too much stock in what the Russians say. They are constantly working on, shall I say, the theatre of their performance. And now they have come up with some new line to try and both win over Trump after the apparently very successful meeting with Zelensky in Florida at the weekend, but also to allow them to puff themselves up as the indignant victims. It's quite interesting, for example, already we've had Narendra Modi of India on social media expressing his shock and horror and such like. I think from the Russians' point of view, they will milk this for all it's worth, but I don't think they are going to make any particular change to their negotiating position.
All right, thanks for that. Really good to have your views there, Mark. Cheers. Mark Galeotti there, Russia security expert, joining us here on Times Radio.
Can you help us understand exactly what happened here? How clear is it that this attack took place?
Well, not entirely clear at the moment, but it could be potentially true, and it could be very much in keeping with the kind of sabotage operations that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. Remember that there was a lieutenant general who was killed in a car bomb in Moscow just a few days ago, and almost a year to the date, a similar sort of operation had happened in Kyiv. Eventually, was deemed responsible for that. And so this would be in keeping with the type of sort of tandem diplomacy that you have on the one hand with President Zelensky going to Mar-a-Lago over the last couple of days, but at the same time these these attacks that are deniable, and also these very big overt attacks that are fatal and very, very visible, are still happening with regards to the Ukraine war, perpetrated by Russia, sending missiles into Ukrainian territory and taking people's lives over, the holiday period. But also, as I said before, these sort of covert operations deep into Russia that could be very, very risky from the Ukrainians' point of view. But we know that they are able to do it and have done it in the past.
When there's been a strike like that, would there normally be evidence provided?
I'm not entirely sure. I suppose over the next couple of days, we will have to see. There'll be more information, obviously, presumably, that the US president will have. I mean, obviously, when he was talking about this particular issue, it was on the confines of a big meeting that he had yesterday afternoon with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. So there are two sort of big peace deals that he's trying to bring forth in this last final flurry of diplomacy to cap off the first year of the Trump administration's return to power in the United States. And he hasn't managed to solve the Ukraine war within 24 hours, as he promised when he was first elected. And obviously, there's the intractable issue of Gaza as well that he's got to deal with.
Yeah, we've just been talking about that. And Donald Trump having those very high-profile meetings with, first Zelensky and then Netanyahu within 48 hours this week. What's happened here with this drone strike? Putin is saying now that he's going to sort of review his position in the peace negotiations as a result of this alleged strike on one of his properties. What do you imagine is going to happen next?
Well, I think what will be concerning for Vladimir Putin is the fact that this strikes right to the heart of his own personal, not just his, his neo-imperialistic views of Russia, but his own personal, properties. And as we know, the Russian president is notoriously private about his private life and notoriously protective about his loved ones. He hasn't even publicly acknowledged the first two daughters from his first marriage, let alone his other children with his partner thereafter. And so if there has been a drone strike that's gone right into Russian territory and hit one of his own personal properties, you'd have thought that the Russian president will be very, very unforgiving about that.
And in that clip we heard from Donald Trump, it does sound as though his empathy here right now is with the Russian president.
Well, we've heard this before from Donald Trump over the last few years. And also we know that Donald Trump himself is one of those people who keeps his family close and is also notoriously protective of his family and his children and his dynastical ambitions for them. So it's not entirely surprising that he would say, take the role of, this is terribly unfortunate, shouldn't have happened. I think it's terrible, and it could derail things at this point. The reality is that many Ukraine and Russia watchers will say, well, look, despite all of the talk, despite all the subtle diplomacy, it's abundantly clear that Vladimir Putin at the moment feels that he can just continue to ride out this war of attrition. But as you were saying before, if there start to be more attacks inside Russian territory, closer and closer to his orbit, and we know that Vladimir Putin has been notoriously tightly protected over the last 10, 20 years, the circle of people who are closest to him, including sort of oligarchs, has gotten tighter and tighter. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we had all those famous pictures of him sitting 20 odd meters away from people like other international presidents and counterparts. The fact that this will have gotten closer and closer is probably maybe the only way that Kyiv feels that it can strike its message home, especially if they're dealing, on the other hand, with the United States, with a new president this year who appears to be far more sensitive to Russia's demands rather than Ukraine's.
Nina, thank you for just providing much more of the context. Nina DeSantis, former Europe editor at CNN.